Not Check 1 2. Alright, everyone. Welcome to today's stream. It's been a couple days. In the meantime, I actually released a video of it was a challenge video on my YouTube channel, Marco Going Fast, same as everything else. And the challenge was to jump into a Formula One race car and see just how long it would take me to sort of get my Formula One legs back after having not driven F1 in probably about 4 months at least. So, first stream coming back from a couple day break here, and we're going to head straight into a qualifying session. This is going to be Formula C at the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit in Germany. So I'd obviously the title of this stream has to do with the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which is underway as we speak in real life. Sorry, Steam overlay here. There we are. Proper view angle. So I do apologize that we're not going straight into a Le Mans race. I would love to jump into a Le Mans race as soon as possible. I actually was in a Le Mans qualifying session that was about to turn into a race, and I actually dropped out of that session because I decided I wanted to stream for you guys. And every time I connect my capture card mid-game, the sound driver on Project Cars 2 doesn't seem to like it very much, and where it suffers is the sound driver just loses all sound completely. And in the sound driver selection in the Project Cars settings, the option's there, it's just grayed out, which is great. Super helpful. So this game can be a bit temperamental at times, little stuff like that. So, you know, taking what we can for now, but hopefully we'll be able to get into a Le Mans session sometime soon here. Love to. I actually was doing some qualifying laps in the Toyota car that Mr. Kobayashi, of former F1 driver, that Mr. Kobayashi garnered a pole position in just yesterday, I think it was, qualifying. So probably be jumping back into that car as soon as we can find our way into a Le Mans session here. But I will say Formula C is a nice change of pace. I don't think I've ever driven Formula C in this game. Well, this is the only game that has Formula C. I think it's well, Formula A in Project Cars is basically Project Cars' version of F1. So I'm assuming that Formula C is Project Cars' version of Formula 3. And you can definitely feel the power difference, the speed difference, even the handling difference from F1 cars. Formula A, rather, should I say, in this game. So coming out for our first qualifying lap now, after our warm-up. Hard on the brakes, all the way wide, and just clipping that apex. Seems that this car likes to oversteer a bit, so that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Trying to avoid slides as best we can, both on exit and entry, 2 corners. Really got to kind of feather it in, and even there, as I'm trying to shift my weight to take the second half of the chicane, sort of succumbing to a little bit of oversteer there, but managed to catch ourselves before too much damage to our lap time was done. And way big slide there. As you can see, that oversteer is a really defining characteristic of this car, or at least this car with this tune. Now it should be noted that as I have not driven Formula C pretty much ever, I think this is my first time in this car, in this game, I most definitely do not have a tune on this car, so this is the stock tune. So in Project Cars 2, you really can't overestimate just how much of a negative effect the stock tune will have on your lap time. So this slidiness could be completely due to just the stock tune here, but nothing that we'll be able to fix before the race, unfortunately. Unless we want to sort of take our chances with the race engineer. But starting to get the feel of it now, so that we don't spin out. It sort of seems that just about anything you do too much of in this car, as is true with any car, but definitely will cause you to spin out. Definitely a little quicker, I feel like, in this car than in most cars. That threshold is a little lower. Too much steering, too much braking on the way in, too much throttle on the way out, too much of anything, and you're spinning out. Even there, taking that corner pretty slowly, as we absolutely ruin our first lap here in qualifying by going off the track, but that's okay. We've got at least about 2 laps left worth of qualifying, so let's see if we can't bring that time down a little bit. But even then, at a 10-second time deficit from the leader, that was still enough to qualify us 6th place, simply due to lack of qualifying laps by the 7th through 13th places on the grid, who have not yet put in a qualifying lap. But it seems that we are a fair amount behind the pace, letting that slide work for us that time. Although I'm sorry to say that that's probably not something that we'll be able to rely on too consistently. And there is no such thing as powering through a corner in this car. And there's almost no such thing as carrying speed through a corner in this car. Because, I mean, mid-corner, if you're doing anything other than just sort of following the curb, you're gonna have a bad time. Staying pretty consistent with our last lap here, consistently slow. But I'm sure that as long as we don't spin out on this lap, we should be able to gain at least a second, maybe 2, thanks to that last corner spin that we had on the last lap. Hopefully we'll be able to avoid all kinds of similar drama for this one. Taking these high-speed corners quite a lower speed, if I'm honest. That one was fine, but that one's just about a straight, so braking hard before we turn in there into the Schumacher S's. Our wheel is going everywhere as our front left tire makes contact with the rumble strips, and we managed to avoid a similar pitfall from last lap, and that puts us 4.2 seconds, 4.3 seconds up from our last qualifying time, back into 6th place. And already faster off the line thanks to the lack of speed from our first lap going into our second. Now we've got a lot more going from our second into our third, and managing to even still run it off the track because this is a Formula C car. I will say that, especially with the stock tune, this car feels very little like a Formula A car, and it feels very little like a Formula Renault 3.5 car, both of which are quite better balanced out of the box. Even still, managing to shave off an extra 2 seconds, just over 2 seconds, from our third lap qualifying time, as we slide all the way through this corner. And we overcook it completely. Managed to hold it to where it doesn't throw us straight into the wall, but definitely not ideal, and that's going to ruin our last qualifying lap, unfortunately. Barely getting out of the way of another car that was barreling down those high-speed S's. seems to have far better control of this car than I do. It's not necessarily a hard car to drive, just a little unpredictable, I'd say. Once you sort of, or rather should I say, maybe a little temperamental. It really does not want to seem to stick to the ground very much. But that is okay. We're going to just bring it straight back into the pits because we've really got nothing better to do here. And that is going to put us into 8th place qualifying at a 209.289 in our one qualifying lap. So quite a few people with a slower pace than us somehow. Let's see if we can't take our chances here with the race engineer. Downforce, spinning out in fast corners, raise the rear downforce. Yeah, let's see what that does. Suspension. Tires are gone and not working. Not really. Braking. Braking seems fine. Okay, so let's save this and see where we can go from here. Now, at the beginning of the stream, right when I started, I had gone into a GT3 lobby. I believe at, I want to say, Watkins Glen. But I've been having I think it's a glitch that's been occurring lately in Project Cars, which actually causes, I've noticed it tends to be GT3 lobbies at, I can't say definitively Watkins Glen. I think at Watkins Glen. I know this time it definitely was. But the issue is that, sorry, just adjusting my fan here. It's a hot and humid day here in Chicago, so but beautiful out, beautiful light drizzle, sort of all day, and that's my favorite kind of weather. But yeah, so I've been noticing a glitch that happens when, like I said, I can't say it's definitively only on Watkins Glen, but I've definitely noticed it this last time on Watkins Glen, and before, I want to say the last time it happened to me, I think it was also Watkins Glen, where when I go load up a GT3 car, once again, can't say it's definitively GT3, but that's what it's happened to me with, and I try to change my tune to a pre-existing tune. In this case, I was trying to use the Monza tune for qualifying that I have on the 488 GT3 Ferrari. And when I go to load up my tune, it only gives me options for Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca. So I'm not sure what's going on there, especially considering we weren't even at Laguna Seca. But let me check the lobby here. But yeah, I hope that gets resolved soon. So we got pretty clear weather here at the Nürburgring today. Standing start, no mandatory pit, 7 laps with no cooldown and no formation laps. So pretty straightforward, 7-lap race. Just got to kind of go for it. Now we're going into this a little blind setup-wise. Obviously I put in a couple qualifying laps, but really very little downforce available during those qualifying laps. So I did go into the race engineer and sort of took my chances and decided to see if that would help me out, and I chose the downforce option and chose the option that correlates to spinning out in fast corners, I think it was. So let's see, hopefully that makes a positive difference here. Halfway decent start. Obviously with less power and less RPM range, he's only rev up to about 9,000-10,000 RPM at the red line. Oh, locking up big time on the entry to the first corner. We managed to keep it relatively tidy and not make any contact there. But yeah, with the diminished power, oh, and we're already spinning out. That's okay. Just have to play it safe. With the diminished power that's available in these, or rather should I say, the lower power And we get punted right off track, but that's okay. We make it back on in time. Just enough to fulfill the race controls request of us to drop back into position 8 without losing even a car length to position 8. Or position 7, rather, should I say. But yeah, starts are a little bit easier in this car, I will say. That's one thing that we've got a little bit on. And there we go, taking 7 on the inside there. Managing to hold it through that corner. I noticed that's one of the ones that this car really likes to spin out in a lot. And this is a car that you're sort of consistently driving on the edge. And even when you're used to a GT3 car, or especially a Formula 1 car, the edge is not nearly as extreme as it sounds. Sort of like the Edge from U2, who just seems kind of like an all-around good guy. He's a father. Definitely not as extreme as his name would imply, just a nice guy with a lot of guitars and some cool beanies. So coming into the Schumacher S's here, and hopefully we don't make the Schumacher S's live up to their namesake. Obviously Michael Schumacher having a habit of throwing the car into the corner, as I did there, though I did manage to avoid pretty much any drama on that one. Although that last corner was a little more difficult to avoid the slide. Michael Schumacher, obviously famous for his driving style of sort of throwing the car into a corner, rotating it around the front axle, letting this guy go up the inside there, just because we don't want to get punted off the track. And my suspicion was correct as we go sliding like crazy. Almost taking some people out here, and we're gonna just throw it off the track because I really didn't want to take some people out there and ruin their race. And that puts us into 11th as we get a warning for safety standards. Fair play, I suppose, there. And you know, this really just proves, I'm gonna assume that it's the car tune that's doing this. But this really is a great example to serve to show just how much a tune can do, especially in this game. Why on earth they decided to release this game with such horrible tunes on these stock cars is beyond me. Not to be confused with stock cars. But yeah, and as we see another guy getting into a little bit of entanglement there. Still 2 laps, or sorry, still 2 positions behind me. So as long as not too many people rage quit, as did the gentleman that just spun out through the last corner there, I should hopefully avoid complete and utter embarrassment. And you know, I'm just kind of starting to feel the car out a little more. But you really have to drive this one. It's really one of those cars where you have to color very much within the lines, and if you don't, well, you're sort of in for it in a big way. Forget about braking through a corner. Forget about powering out of a corner. You sort of just got to steer it, and then whatever you can do within what you're steering allots, that's what you're going to do. There is no fancy footwork here helping us out. This is pure braking in and turning in. And it seems that just about everyone else on the grid is really underestimating. And that corner keeps catching us out. I mean, I don't know what's up with that corner with this car, but it just really does not like it there. But yeah, it seems as though most of the grid is taking that first corner a little too fast on entry there. So already 2 cars that we've let pass by us up the inside, because if we didn't, honestly and truly, we would have been punted off. So not necessarily the cleanest tactic, but you know, hey, some people can only win one way, so you got to give it to them, I guess. And it is an iRacing, so no spotters here, no refs here. Sort of a Wild West, sort of anything goes kind of attitude when it comes to the Project Cars penalty system, which is in and of itself self-guided. Managing to hold it through the high-speed S there as we come up to the heavy braking zone into the sharp left-hander, which we managed to just pull off. Really starting to get a little bit of a better feel of where the limit is in this car, at least with this tune. Now I've got to say that I mean I kind of have to believe that these cars do generate more downforce than this, but that's why I'm kind of just blaming the tune. I don't think if I can think of a single open wheel race car that generates less downforce than this car that was made in the past 30 years or so. I'd say even 80s, 90s era F1 cars. As we set our fastest lap of the race, almost 6/10 down, I believe, from what I can tell. My monitor is not so great, so that's what it looked like, but very much might not be. Taking a way better line into that corner there, and we're going to put a little bit of brake to sort of ease us into that one. Managed to avoid the drama that we've seen just about every other lap in this race on that one. And living up to the Schumacher namesake, although that was not the Schumacher S, with a very sideways entrance there. And somehow that finds me almost 2 seconds on my first sector. And now up to over 2 seconds on our fastest lap, so that might just mean that we haven't had a completely clean lap yet. That wasn't the first lap, at least, and I think even then the first lap was probably our worst, so if I remember correctly. But even with the lack of tune here, definitely a fun car to drive because of the whole challenge of not spinning out constantly. But, you know, every car's got its quirks, so I suppose maybe that's just a Formula C kind of quirk. It should be noted that, well, it's to my knowledge at least, we should probably be running no traction control, no ABS. Traditionally, I have those set to none and none, respectively, but lately I've been driving with them on authentic, because, I mean, the whole mentality behind the none and none thing to begin with was sort of a result of, you know, I just sort of wanted the most simulator realistic experience that I could muster, and if I could get good lap times there, then that's maybe a little something to brag about. As we finish this lap, speaking of things to brag about, over 3 seconds faster than the rest of our laps in this race, so definitely moving in the right direction here. As we already find almost 3/10 of a second on our last lap even, but definitely slower coming out of the first corner. Making up a little bit of that on the second corner there, even though we did run all over the track side and full drift there, full four-wheel drift, as we have to throw the wheel into the left and catch it in a way that would not be possible with a Formula rim. So there's an instance where running a G29 round steering wheel is actually a benefit to us as opposed to a detractor. Running extra wide on that corner there, but managing to power out nicely. Not upsetting the car too much. Trying to take this corner with as little lift as possible. We just barely lifted about a hair or two off of the throttle there. I keep pushing it every lap just to see, you know, what we can pull off here. But it seems as though this almost might just be a car where you kind of have to drive in a Schumacher style. You know, just sort of throwing it into a corner and finding just a little bit of wheel spin on the rear end and riding that through. Definitely seems to be faster when I take the corners that way, but which is definitely counterintuitive, but oh well. and now at the Schumacher S's, taking them very nicely indeed. Schumacher S's named after Michael Schumacher, of course, 7-time Formula One world champion, as this is his home racetrack. Using up all of the track here on the entry to corner 1, as well as on the exit, giving us a little more room coming into the second corner here. And once again, sliding, catching the curb, sliding even more, braking, trying to keep a wide line here so that I can get a steeper entry into that corner, and it did work, and we get a beautiful line out of that corner, out of that chicane. Now a little bit of a higher speed left-hander here, taking it in 4th gear for the first time in the race, normally something I take in 3rd, but I find that as I get faster and learn a track more, I can sort of take corners in higher gears and have just a little more power in the taps ready to go to exit out of the corner in a lower RPM range. More power available as we run off into the sand. In a lower RPM range, more power available, and less propensity for wheel spin and other variables that might get introduced more likely with a lower gear, higher RPM values. Powering out. Definitely far from smooth in this car, but we are getting there. Not bad for a first go, I'd say. Now that time, definitely braked way too late. I have a problem with this track where I actually drive the combined version of the Nürburgring more than I drive, the strictly Grand Prix version of the Nürburgring. And there are 2 different variants of the Schumacher S's on the Nürburgring circuit on the Grand Prix portion. The Grand Prix layout has the very steep left-right, very sharp, almost actually just about 90-degree angle turns, if not exactly 90 degrees, left and then right. Whereas the combined circuit has a much more relaxed sort of 3rd gear, mid-range speed, left-right, just sort of, you know, tap the apex on each chicane. Almost reminiscent of sort of how you would take the last couple chicanes on Le Mans. As we get a slow car warning there, giving us ever so slight amounts of hope of catching up to the 8th place car in front of us, as we currently sit, not say sitting pretty, because I don't know if you can ever sit pretty in 9th place, but so we're currently sitting consistently in 9th place, unfortunately. But the 8th place car is in our sights, so I don't think that we will be able to catch him. Seems that whatever hope that we gained from the slow car warning has been removed, has been revoked forcefully by the race complete warning, which means that as we bring this lap in, the race will in fact be over. Coming into the Schumacher S's, taking a beautiful line through there until the exit, where we're really just sliding all over the place, almost sliding into the pits, but managing to avoid the pit lane entry. And sliding all the way through, 4-wheel drift style, the last corner, as we bring it up the back finish straight for a 9th place finish in the Formula C car. So definitely not the best race we've ever run. But for the first race in a new car, you know, top 2/3 of the field, I guess that's considered the midfield. So the exact back end of the midfield, albeit, but the midfield nonetheless. So actually that gives us an 8th place finish, and I assume that's because somebody left. But 8th place will take it. I'm going to get out of this session here because I'm not sure I can bear another race of untuned Formula C action there. And let's see if there is anything available at the 24-hour Le Mans layout. Sorting by number of people in the session, obviously, because the more people on the grid, the more fun it is. And we've got an LMP1 session here, it looks like, at Le Mans, 24-hour layout, with about 10 people in the lobby. So hopefully that'll increase to a good 10, 13, 14, who knows. Really cool. So we've got a lot of, it looks like pretty much everything GTE. Some LMP1 cars, LMP2. Should be fun. Pretty much every Le Mans prototype in the game. We are going to take the Toyota Hybrid here in the real-life Denso livery. And let's get the red mirrors just because. Also, 7, it should be noted, is my lucky number. 7 being my birthday day, January 7th. Which I do share with Lewis Hamilton, current Formula 1 world champion, which is a factoid that I share at every available opportunity, not only on this channel, but off of it as well. So rest assured, you'll be hearing it a lot more if you're somebody who returns to my channel. Making Lewis and I very firm Capricorns, and as we all know, Capricorns as Capricorns are very Capricorn to begin with. And, just jumping into the session here, we've already got a 2nd place qualifying, so starting off the session really strong here. And it looks like everybody's sort of starting out their laps here, their qualifying laps at least, coming in from their warm-up laps. A fairly new session, it seems, as we power out of the pits. Definitely a little bit of a culture shock there, as you can see exemplified by the first chicane that we cut pretty non-graciously. But a bit of a culture shock coming from that Formula C car with no downforce to this LMP1 car, which produces quite a fair bit of downforce. And it looks like we can take that corner maybe a little bit faster. Might help us there, generate a little more downforce through the corner and just stick it a little bit more. Lifted there off of the throttle, which unfortunately caused us to almost not oversteer necessarily, but I'd say closer to a 4-wheel slide through that first corner into the back straight. Into Le Mans' famous back straight, rather should I say, world famous back straight, which does look a fair bit different from how it looked even as recently as 20 years ago. And I say that, I suppose 20 years is a long time, but if you're like me, a child of the 90s, it doesn't seem quite as long as it was. As we start closing the gap between ourselves and the LMP1 in front of us, which it should be noted, or rather should I say, sorry, reading the lineup as if it's the race grid, which it is not. Though looking at the lineup in the top left corner there, the qualifying lineup, which is not the gentleman that's in front of us in this car, but we've got somebody sharing the same race initials as us, the MAR, which is actually completely inaccurate, and I should maybe get around to changing that sometime soon. It should be LEK, the first 3 of my last name, not the first 3 of my first name, but oh well. And there's our lap time invalidated, and if damage were on, well, I hope damage isn't on, actually it might be, based on how this car feels now. It feels definitely far more loose in the steering, so I'm actually going to bring it back to the pits, because we don't really have time to waste here. Even now, just coming straight out of the pits, we'll have time for 1 lap warm-up and then 1 lap for qualifying, so hitting that tire wall there is not doing us any favors, definitely hurting our chances. Now, this is another thing that I absolutely despise about Project Cars 2. As you can see, there is nobody getting ready to exit the pit lane right now, and yet for some reason the drive option is only now just becoming available. So, and then in other instances, the drive option will be available, you hit it, and then you've got to wait for a car that may or may not be coming down the pit lane as fast as makes sense, should we say. I've had to message people in the in-game chat before, like, hey, how about you just like either be in the pits or out of the pits, but the whole like stopping in the middle of the pit lane thing isn't really conducive to me leaving my pit garage, because currently it's not letting me. So as you can see, a lot faster on our second lap out here. Culture Shock wearing out, but we do turn in a bit late there into that that corner leading into the back straight here, so see if we can't nail that before the race, hopefully for our qualifying lap, which will then carry into the race. That is one of the corners here at the Le Mans 24-hour layout that does seem to get me quite often, just because it is such a high-speed corner, which does require some finesse and or rather, if not finesse, it does require you to sort of take a proper line through it, of which I'm still trying to work out. It seems I either run too wide or I run too narrow coming out of the corner. Too wide, obviously, is not good because I end up going off track. Oh, and a little bit of a brain fart there, as we think that we're at the first chicane, when in reality we're at the second chicane, so attacking it from the wrong side of the road completely, but managed to brake early enough to avoid any significant drama. Now on the third stretch of the back straight, of course, as I was talking earlier about the back straight, which used to be one long back straight and is now a long back straight with two chicanes in the middle of it, making it three smaller straights. So all for the best, I suppose. Definitely probably safer, and from what I've understood, definitely less terrifying going into the last corner of the straight, turning out. Now, as I said, it is rather hot in my room right now. I think half of which has to do with my PC that I haven't dusted in far too long. And the other half of which has to do with the humidity in the area, combined with the fact that my room is on the highest floor of the house. Those always tend to be the hottest rooms. So the fan is very much necessary, and it's probably about the same temperature as the inside of a Le Mans car here. So getting extra simulator here, extra added immersion, extra added realism. All I'm missing is the race suit to really sweat my balls off. Taking a little bit of a risque line there through the last corner, but it works out for us as we get a great exit into the straight here. Now for our qualifying lap, really slamming on the brakes, focusing on our lines, running wide there, in contrast to what I just said, and getting 2 warnings for penalties here, as the race control believes that I seem to be going too fast for their liking. Well, it's Le Mans, I say, so too fast is no such thing. And we just can't help but lift there, it seems. Not sure if it's our brain psyching us out, or if our brain's actually doing the right thing and making sure that we don't go completely off track and into the wall. Remains to be seen, but I don't know, maybe we'll find the cojones to throw it in just a little more during the race I think also half of it is the fear that I won't be able to find the proper line, because you really do have to be on the right line for that corner to, especially to carry that much speed through it. And somehow we're getting penalty warnings on the back straight. So you tell me how that works, Project Cars 2. Rigged, I say, rigged. As we come into the second of the two back chicanes, and once again, not really cutting any corners here. I mean, just barely clipping the apexes, so I'm not sure what sort of conniption Project Cars is having with itself right now, but it really just seems to be warning happy at the moment. Bah humbug, I say. Having none of it. Give me a penalty if you must. This is Le Mans, so we will succeed. We will triumph. And we will be crowned champion. You mark my words. As the grid grows to a quite interesting 22 cars, of which we're currently qualified 21st. So I have no doubt that that will be changing. Oh, well, I guess not, because our lap time has been invalidated by the absolutely overzealous, non-existent, might I add, race director. So, in true Le Mans fashion, I can't even go find a race director to punch out after this qualifying lap, because he doesn't exist. But Project Cars might be receiving a strongly worded letter in the mail, because I'm just not having it. I don't understand how the penalty system works in Project Cars at all. And you know, in all fairness, I don't even think that Project Cars understands how the penalty system works in Project Cars, judging by the penalties and warnings that I've been receiving, not just today, but it seems around Le Mans. It seems consistent around Le Mans. So I don't know if it's just plain broken. Maybe that's a future video to make here to see just how much we can push this penalty system, but hopefully bringing this lap in here as we finish 15 seconds behind the pace of the leader, also in an LMP1. Hopefully that's enough to, well, I was hoping it would be enough to at least propel us to, well, something better than 21st, or sorry, 20th, within the large midfield of non-qualifiers, but it seems that is not the case, and it seems that Le Mans does not like me very much. Now, here's the crazy part about that is the only person rather, should I say, on the grid with any penalties is this guy in dead last place. So I really don't know how. I mean, is it just me and Frankie back here that are... And Frankie, whose last lap is, no offense to Frankie, but accurately about 5 minutes slower than my lap, which is worth about 1.5 entire laps for me, just in the deficit between mine and his. So I think that we're a fair bit faster than Frankie. And I think that we're actually a fair bit faster than Benno here. We're even faster than the 4th place car, or the 14th place car, my apologies, Mr. Verdugo. So yeah, how this is going, I do not know. I'm thinking though that this is definitely going to have to be a, let's see, 20 minutes. I'm thinking this is definitely going to have to be a video that we work on sometime soon. Because, I mean, wow, you know, I just don't know how that happens. Let's see, so 20 minutes should be enough. 20 minutes, 28 laps times 3, 20, well, times 330 even, so that's over 24 minutes. No change of tires recommended. Yeah, I suppose that makes sense as a fail-safe, if nothing else. Oh, and there's our pit strategy window gone. Definitely some weird quirks Project Cars 2 has, but until I make the jump into iRacing, it's just something I'm going to have to put up with for now.
Let's take some people off the line.
Oh, great! So there's no race lobby. So I guess that's just what our pitch strategy is gonna look like. Going straight from qualifying onto the grid here. Great start. Barely any wheel spin off the line. Huge collision behind us. Wow. Glad we missed out on that one. As we come up the inside of an LMP2 car here and we clip each other. Very reminiscent of the, I believe it was Toyota and Audi crash from a couple of years ago. Around, not that corner, but well, this one coming up here, this left-hander. And that puts us into 16th place as we fight for the 15th spot. And we seem to get it. Although it seems to be a sort of a plague that's hit the rest of the cars on the grid, to where when we're fighting for a position, they just sort of turn into the back of you. I don't know if they're trying to pit maneuver me or what, but definitely does not seem like fair play here. So finally onto the back straight and putting some distance between myself and the abysmal drivers behind me, let's be honest. I mean, I'm not really one to call names or poke fun or anything like that, but I mean, there are just some people who, there's just no other word for it, really. I mean, I'd be lying if I told you otherwise, and I'm not a liar, so calls it like I sees it, I suppose you could say. As we settle in to 15th, chasing down the grouping of the 14th and 13th place car and the rest of the grid in a fairly tightly grouped pack, not out of our eye shot as we push into 14th place, capitalizing on the mistake of the prior 14th place car, who took that corner a little bit too aggressively and managed to spin out on the exit. So going all the way wide for our entry into this sharp right-hander here. And I thought I saw a car in the air as I entered that corner, but I might have been mistaken because there's still a little bit of a gap between myself and the cars in front as we hit 7th gear, barely inching our way up through the miles per hour top speed range. Obviously, once the hybrid boost is gone, you're really going to have a hard time hitting a top speed that's anything reminiscent of fast. Running a little wide on that corner there, but that's sort of what that corner is made for. And a slowdown warning from race control, so let's try to heed that one. Now, that is the first one that we've gotten this race, so I do remember the last time I was racing around Le Mans, getting all of those penalties from, and coming up on the inside here, having to avoid a crashed out LMP. And there's our first 1 second time penalty for exceeding track limits, which was given to us for barely cutting the grass. So yeah, I don't know if it's just overzealous, an overzealous penalty system here on this track, or if it's an overzealous, if it just happens to be overzealous lobby hosts who, I mean, I don't even know if there's a setting for that strict of corner cutting stringency. I mean, geez. Le Mans is obviously a circuit that's made to, certain corners are made to be cut a little bit. For example, the completely flat rumble strip on the outside of the first corner going into the first corner there. You're supposed to run wide and then bring it in. as the 10th place car really starts to pull away from us here. So let's hope we can find that speed here on the straights. And it's not looking like we're going to find it on this first straight here. Hopefully we can brake hard into the first chicane, build up that turbo or that hybrid boost. There we are, as the blue meter towards the bottom of the speedometer starts to fill and then deplete respectively. So the hybrid boost bringing us right up to 170 miles an hour and no more. 170 just barely. So definitely not a very generous system, but absolutely crucial nonetheless. Taking an excellent line through the second chicane there in the back straight. Hybrid boost not lasting nearly as long that time as we slug our way up through the 170s up to 180. And hard on the brakes again, running wide, and once again being given a penalty. And in the fear of... Now that penalty was just for slightly cutting the white line on the outside there. And I actually hit the brakes even harder because I was expecting to get a penalty for running wide, and I didn't want to have that happen. So I sort of overcooked it with the brakes there a little bit and ended up spinning out completely. But it does look as though there's been a little bit of an incident here, one corner up from the one I'm taking now, this sharp right-hander that seems to have slowed down a couple of the cars, hopefully, looking at my mini-map here at least. Running way wide on the exit to that corner, starting to feel my tires just a little bit as we lose 2 places, hopefully not a third, and almost clip the second Toyota car, but a good re-entry is one that does not lose as much time as possible. So, as long as we don't clip him, I would say that we are good. Now, as far as tunes go on these LMP cars, why I haven't put a tune on for really actually any LMP car. These are cars that I drive fairly often in this game. Why I haven't put a tune on for any model at all, not the Audi, not the, I think there's a Porsche, not the Porsche, not the Toyota, not even the, I think there's a Merrick, is beyond me, because as we know, the stock tunes are pretty garbage in Project Cars 2. As the 12th place car runs a little wide, a little too wide rather should I say. And we managed to bring it up the inside there. So I want to keep it tight as he really goes for that corner cut. And I'm just going to make sure I stay on his tail here because that was not kosher. You guys might see this turn into a little bit of a NASCAR race here because in the same way that NASCAR racers tend to voice their frustrations at another driver via the rear bumper, yeah, you guys might see a little of that action here, especially considering that another one of Project Car 2's weird quirks, sometimes when you unplug your wheel and you know, like say you have to move your computer somewhere. I move my computer quite a bit between here and the recording studio because sometimes when I'm in the studio I like to take a break and put in a few laps, so I move my computer, I move my wheel and pedals, etc. And one of the weird quirks that Project Cars 2 has is sometimes, even though the G29 is arguably the most widely implemented wheel in the consumer market, at least. Not the prosumer market, but the consumer market. Despite that, sometimes when restarting Project Cars 2, freshly connecting the wheel, before even starting the game, it just won't work. It'll recognize the wheel, but it just won't work. So what you have to do is actually go into your documents and go into your profiles and delete your controller settings. Now the problem with that is it doesn't delete any of the force feedback settings or anything like that. Oh, and there we overcooked the brakes just a little more again. We're gonna let this guy by, and the other Toyota. Lots of Toyotas out here on track, thanks to Mr. Kobayashi. But yeah, it doesn't delete any of your force feedback settings or anything like that. But what it will do is completely get rid of all of your controller assignments. So I can't flash my lights at anybody like that guy in front of me that took the well, really that pushed me off track completely, and I can only hope that that was him because he was in a Toyota car. Well, maybe I hope that that's him too because he was in a Toyota car too. So I don't know which Toyota it is out here wishing harm on every Toyota. When in reality it was just the one guy who kind of spoiled it for us. But yeah, I having lost my button assignments, having not reassigned them yet, which is something I find myself doing all too frequently because of this issue. Sorry, just really focusing through those corners there. I'm starting to notice that the Toyota is a little easier to spin out than the Audi, which is what I'm usually in. I am a big German car fan, so I drive a Mercedes. So in real life, so big German car guy here, and so naturally I'm in the Audi most of the time. Although I suppose the Porsche would count there too. Running a little wide on the entry to that corner. But it does seem that the Toyota is a little easier to sort of overcook through the corners as we bounce off the wall. Definitely not the prettiest race. And I myself am feeling quite parched, I must say. Now, mind you, in addition to the high temperatures, I did just drive back basically across the entire length of the city of Chicago. I'm located at the very far southeast tip in the suburbs, just over the border to Indiana. And I had to drive some family members out to O'Hare Airport, which is all the way on the northwestern tip, so basically traversing the entire length of the city there. And I haven't had any water or anything to quench my thirst in a bit here. Definitely not since before arriving to the airport. So on top of that, immediately after getting home, and then subsequently right before I jumped onto the sim here, I did eat some Chinese food leftovers, which bourbon chicken and fried rice, definitely not the best for dehydration. So I will say I'm starting to feel that a little bit, starting to feel a little out of it. But given that there's only 6 minutes and 40 seconds left in the race, 45 seconds left in the race, sorry, should be okay. But definitely gonna have to take a break from the stream after this one and go rehydrate and maybe make a business call or two. I've got a band that might be jumping into the studio today, which is, well, not today, but rather I have to talk to their manager today and hopefully work out the details. But that might be jumping into the studio soon, which is something I'm very excited for because now, if you don't know, I am a music producer, music engineer. Amongst other things in the media industry, I've really run the gamut of the whole entertainment industry as far as, I mean, I've pretty much held just about every job you can, other than, I guess, writer. Definitely songwritten, though, so maybe that counts. And I've written articles. I actually started a online sort of entertainment media presence not too long ago, which I exclusively wrote for. It's kind of sort of culture, arts, fashion, etc., music, popular culture, I guess, base. But I actually had to sort of stop doing that because while it was a great outlet and I really enjoyed it, it just took up literally every second of my waking day, and I really had no time for anything else. And that's one of my favorite things about my life, is that I get to race cars and spend time in the recording studio and do all of these different fun things, photo shoots, video shoots, whatever it may be, songwriting, tours, etc. So lots of fun, but definitely less fun when you really have no time during the day to do anything else other than one thing. And for someone like me, that just won't do. So definitely excited to hopefully be getting a band into the studio as well. Like I said, rock band. I really do enjoy rock. Oh, nice. Oh, I love that. I've never even gotten that message before. My pit chief just came over the radio and let me know that the sun is setting. So to start picking up some brake reference points for, the dark. So very cool little immersion factor there. I've never received that pit message before, possibly because I've never done a race that runs into the night. Though I can't imagine that's true. I think I have, but I'm not sure I can think of one off the top of my head, to be honest. So I very likely haven't. But yeah, excited to be recording a rock group because I do a lot of rap. Obviously the market is supportive of that right now in large. And that's traditionally where I've lived in most of my career, is in the rap industry. And we've done some cool stuff in that industry, but it's always like refreshing and also a nice little challenge to record a band, and actually multi-track and actually put in the time. It's definitely a process. It's very much more a process because, when you're recording rap, unless you're doing some Childish Gambino-esque arrangement where you're, doing everything in-house right there, arranging the entire song, 9 times out of 10 you've got a beat, and then you've got, great entry to that corner there. Starting to close the gap between myself and the small pack in front of us. See if we can't overtake both of these guys before the end of the race. We've got 2 minutes 40 seconds left, so if we can't, I will be surprised, as we're speeding past the Audi R18. Anyway, yeah, it's a great little challenge. It's nice to make use of my studio in that way too, because and we throw it into the wall. So it looks like we're not going to be able to catch those guys after all, but that's okay. We did our best. Yeah, it's nice to make use of my studio in that way because I did put several $1,000s extra into it. In the aim of making it a studio that can record multi-track recordings. So I can actually do full bands. I can do up to 16 microphones at once currently. Looking to expand that to about 48 at once sometime soon, which means I'll be able to do full orchestral Hollywood film scores here. Not that I intend to do that. I do arrange some of those on my free time because that's one of my favorite genres to work in. It's just a lot of dynamic, a lot of feeling, a lot of emotion. But most of that is MIDI notes similar to a hip-hop producer in Fruity Loops, doing that sort of thing. But it's nice to actually have to multi-track and get to use some of the outboard gear and play with more toys and really use my studio to its full potential as opposed to just one mic that stays in the same spot in the booth, which is great, and that's a great setup and definitely a heck of a workflow. Definitely get a lot done that way, but there's something to be said of the whole process of tracking a band. That it's just it's more. It almost feels more like You know, if I were to compare it to something, it feels like the same way it feels to work on a movie. You know, when you're sort of... I think that's just because it takes more time. It's almost a cabin fever-esque kind of thing, where, you know, you're kind of stuck with the same guys for, you know, well, in the case of recording a band, a week or two, you know, depending on how much they have to record, at least a couple days. In the case of a movie, a month or two. Really starting to lose our pace here as the session time runs out and we wrap up our last lap with an absolutely beautiful overcast sky to look at. I mean, wow, look at those clouds. I'm tempted to throw it into bumper cam or something like that. We'll see if I can. Gotta go outside. Wow, that sky. That's the kind of sky that inspires me to write songs, I'm gonna be honest. A lot of people don't like the overcast, cloudy kind of days, but wow, I mean, there's really just nothing better than it, in my opinion, than a dark, cloudy sky. The darker the better, really, too. Dark and moody, you know? Even though I never drive in the follow cam, it's weird because, you know, you read online, like for example, Gran Turismo Sport will put out videos of some of their pro drivers and semi-pro drivers, you know, taking laps around a track and, you know, teaching the optimal racing line around that track. And they tend to do it in follow camera mode. And I always see comments of people that are like, oh, follow cam is so stupid, like, it's so much easier, anybody can race well in follow cam mode. Well, as I say that, spin out to my death. But, you know, anybody can race well in follow cam mode. It's all about the cockpit mode, because that's how a simulator is. You know, you're simulating a race, and in a race you're in the cockpit, blah, 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 whatever. And I never really gave it much merit, but at least through a lot of these corners here, I would say that chicane would... Sorry, bumped the mic stand there. I would say that chicane would probably catch me out in follow cam mode there. But it seems that through a lot of these corners... Let's try this camera. This camera's always fun. Oh, as there's an Audi going straight towards me. Oh, great. So, definitely racing in the post-race, kind of like he did in the actual race, all over the place, for the cooldown lap. But anyway, yeah, I'm kind of starting to see what they mean by that, because, you know, a lot of these less technical corners that are really just all about the racing line, they seem to be taking a lot better in follow cam mode, or rather, it's a lot easier to take them well in follow cam mode. Now, there are always different kinds of people during a cooldown lap. There's the do donuts kind of people, which we saw. There's the congregate on the side of the track people, which we saw. And then there's this guy. He's the stop in the middle of the track kind of people. And then there's me, who's the try-hard, who just keeps racing as if it were the race, because why not? I mean, it's so much fun. I mean, that's why I'm here to begin with. It's because it's fun, you know, so might as well put in another lap or two. And with that, our race is done. As we get a top 10 finish. Let's see, 5th in our class, 5th in LMP1, giving us 8th overall. Not horrible. Raised my driver rating a little bit, I think. Maybe it lowered it. I don't know. Seems like sometimes it does more harm than good, but you never know. And the 10th place car, with 50 seconds worth of time penalty. I can only imagine what on earth he did to deserve that. As a matter of fact, I don't want to imagine. But on that note, on that bombshell, it is time I leave you for what is the first and possibly only stream of the day. I'm going to have a huge ice cold glass of ice water because I really need it right now. And maybe a little bit later tonight I'll be up to racing a little more, but I'm gonna go watch the actual race, the actual Le Mans race, and I suggest you do the same because it's something to see, that's for sure. Definitely a sight to behold. And in the meantime, stay fast. I will see you guys. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good one.